Welcome back, everyone. For this session, we have a panel titled Reducing Cost and Carbon Footprint with Energy Efficient Buildings. This session will be moderated by Rahed Baikarat, Senior Energy Advisor at CEBC. I'd like to remind our audience that they can send in their questions using the chat features, and our speakers will do their best to answer these. Can I please ask speakers to now turn on their webcam and microphones? And without further ado, Rahed, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, April. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining this panel that is looking at green buildings and energy efficient buildings. I would like to start by giving a quick tidbit about the Clean Energy Business Council, CEBC. We are a not-for-profit organization registered in Masdar, Abu Dhabi. And CEBC basically aims at bridging the private sector, the industrial sector, with the governmental sector in the clean tech space in the MENA region. And we do this basically through white papers, we have working groups, we do conduct workshops, and we participate in events such as these. And I'm delighted to be moderating this panel. Now, to kick this off, I would like just to start maybe by giving a couple of points that maybe can guide some of the discussion that we're having. If we take buildings in general, be it residential, governmental, commercial buildings, and you see the percentage of the load that these buildings present on any utility, you can take DEWA, take Saudi electricity companies, look at their annual reports, you realize that buildings in general constitute easy 80–85% of the consumption. So most of the load is represented in buildings, as we all know. And most of the primary fuel source or primary energy source for these buildings is electricity. Now, as we know in our region, there is a big drive towards sustainability, and we hear about all these deployments of solar mainly and wind projects. But really, when you come down to it, looking at the energy cycle of any process, any building, you can take it on a macro level as a city and what have you, really doesn't start, as we all know, with the integration of renewables. It starts by looking at optimization of a process, looking at reducing the amount of inputs for a process, looking at reuse of water, wastewater, if you will, the reuse of heat. And at the end, then you start decarbonizing by introducing renewables. So with that, I would like to kick this off. We have here people that are more knowledgeable than me in this topic. And I would like to turn it on to our panelists. Maybe we'll start with a round of introduction, name, title, and what are you busy with? Maybe we start with Avinash.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm an architect working with Godwin St. Johnson Architects, and I'm in this region for last 17 years. And as a role, I'm like very much heavily involved in the overall design, and normally I get into the concept stage and start with the process, and then I'm responsible for the delivery of the building. So in a way, I'm involved from the conception till the inception of the building till the completion and handing over the keys to the client. So
very well. Enrique?
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks Avinash for this introduction, because it cues me right in, because I enter when you finish. So I work at REEM, the energy agency of the Ras Al Khaimah Emirate, and I'm essentially taking care of the energy retrofits and energy management areas, which are essentially taking existing buildings and trying to make them more efficient through retrofits or energy management or any other types of actions that we can do to essentially reduce the energy usage of these existing assets, buildings, etc. We do also work on the code side, the green building codes, to help design new, more efficient buildings. Although personally, I take care of the existing buildings, so that's why I say it was a good cue, so that we can cover both the let's say, life cycles of the assets. No.
Very well, very well. So to start, maybe we can begin being a bit general. Maybe I can, start by posing with the question. What are in general green buildings? What are the efficiency standards that people look at to call a building green, or it has sustainability methods integrated into it? How do we define that? What aspects do we look for in a building to try to evaluate its energy efficiency or sustainability? Avinash, Enrique, I mean, this is going to be, flexible and dynamic. So Avinash, you want to start with that, then answer?
I'll start with that. I mean, whenever we start with the building, we have like some current benchmarks. I mean, sometimes we do create our own benchmarks, or sometimes the municipality, they have got their regulations. Like in Dubai, you have DM Al Safat, which is the buildings which are under Dubai municipality. If you go for Nakil, and so they have got like something called EHS, which is exactly like what we do for LEED. It's called in-house certification, but the credits are like same like LEED certification. And in Abu Dhabi, it's Astadama. So I mean, the day we start with the concept, we start with the key drivers. I mean, what are the things which will guide us throughout the life cycle of the design process? And some of the key drivers are like how to reduce water uses, so water efficiency of the building, then urban heat island reduction. So we go for like greener roof and like how to shade the buildings, minimum energy performance. It's more about like MEP stuff, like how to reduce the overall energy. Like we go for like energy efficient light fitting. Even the air conditioning systems are like more performance oriented. Then coming to the materials, we try to use more of a regional material so that we can reduce directly the carbon footprint. So the focus is on like reuse and regional materials. Then thermal comfort also plays one of the major roles. So especially in this region, when you have like solar gain throughout the year, we try to make our facade more green, and you can say like, I mean, to reduce the solar gains, we go for like energy efficient fabric for the building.
Yes. Enrique, with RAC municipality, are you looking at the same topics that Avinash just mentioned, or do you see the definition a bit differently from the view of RAC municipality?
I think we have a kind of a common understanding. What we did was essentially to define also a green building code applicable to the Emirate that is called Argil. And essentially, Argil is an attempt to tailor the green building code concept to an Emirate that has started on maybe a later stage, so that we can take the steps that we find necessary to establish a good working pattern and a good evolution for the new building. So all of these is that Avinash said are our concerns also, how to build it more efficiently, how to choose the right things to use to make it more efficient also, but also to take a second look at design considerations. I will give you just a small example. We are used to see in this region of the world essentially glass facade buildings. That, of course, given the environment out there, represents an enormous heat gain for the interior, which means that you need to use more AC to keep the occupants still in a comfortable environment. So these design aspects need also to be re-evaluated in the light of what we have learned throughout the last years, and to try to come not to let's say a completely different way, but to a more efficient way of addressing the same purpose. There is a certain purpose in building it like that. We can achieve the same purpose in a more efficient way. Most of the time, the choices are there. It's not that there are no choices, that we cannot choose anything. It's the only way. There are usually alternative ways which are much more efficient. It's just a question of also awareness and education, so that we can choose the best solution for its purpose. And in our case, the best is also the most efficient one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, as a guiding principle, what we do, we start with general process, and we divide the whole thing into, let's say, two parts: active measures and passive measures. So active measures are like more of a things which are like more of a MEP based systems, and passive is something like you orient the building in a different manner so that you reduce the solar gain, or go for like a thicker walls or thicker roofs or green roof. So, I mean, most of the time you'll see that the passive measures are like always easy to incorporate. So what we do, like I mean, whenever we are sitting with the client, we just say that, okay, see, these are the passive measures and these are the active measures. And passive measures are like simple design considerations that can go in the designer. And then it becomes very easy actually. And those things that what you said, like the glass thing, I mean, we always go for like a proper shading, or sometimes reduce the glass area, or if we can't do it, sometimes there's a requirement of like full glazed building, we go for some other shading devices and all those things. So there are like passive means to reduce the overall energy used in the building.
Yeah, I want to bring up one point, gentlemen. I mean, all these points are valid, and there are many or different international standards. Also, the region has standards on emirate or country level of how they classify buildings, and it goes around the use of water, energy, and the points that you've addressed. But if I was a building owner or a building operator, one important point that I think is not looked at sufficiently enough sometimes is the comfort level of the end user. If I have an office building and I have people coming in 8 to 5, to say the least, and they're sitting in this building, the building might be, net zero. I want to talk a little bit about net zero buildings targets, but the end users, they may not be comfortable enough because of the design or because of the envelope that they're sitting in compared to another building. And to me, the end user comfort level has to be defined as a standalone metric. We talk about thermal, we talk about lighting and others, but nobody has a metric, which is not very easy to quantify. I realize that, but I think it all rotates on the end user. At the end of the day, the building is it's only an environment for people to use. So how do you see the end user value in this?
So if I may start there, I think you focus on a couple of very important topics. No, I think the first and maybe the most challenging one is that what is comfort? No, something that is not objective, something that is subjective. You may be comfortable at 28 and I may be comfortable at 18. So how do we define comfort in one building, where you sit and I sit and 100,000 other people sit? It's a very difficult concept. Now, we have some aids that help us and that support us on this. For instance, Ashray has done a lot of research on thermal comfort of occupants within a certain building, going to details such as, depending on the season and the area, geographical area that you are, people, for instance, have different, attires. And for different attires, the thermal comfort will vary. If I am in a full suit or if I am in shorts and t-shirt, my thermal comfort will differ, no? So they have done extensive research on that. And we have, for instance, recently adopted set point guidelines in our buildings that are trying to index that. So we have set, for instance, 23 as a comfort level. Now, does this solve the issue? And the answer is no. We have people unhappy in our building. But I will answer you differently. I will put whatever value you want, and I will always find someone unhappy about it. So the question of comfort is more a question of what is the kind of the common denominator that allows me to maximize happiness of occupants, knowing that I will never achieve full happiness. No, there will always be a small fraction of these people that may not be fully comfortable. Another point, what I've said about Ashray applies, for instance, lighting in the case, for instance, CIFSE, and applies for many other areas, not exactly only cooling or also lighting. But just to finalize, and I will also want to hear Avinash's opinion on this. I think that these needs to be brought into the fold. I fully agree with you, Harry. I think things like, for instance, indoor air quality, that was not an issue a few years back, is now a primary issue because of all of the things that we know of the sick building syndrome and etc., of the quality of the environment where we actually spend most of our time in. These are very important aspects that need to be brought into the fold. We are typically speaking about engineers that are concerned about these areas of quantifying the lumens on the lighting or the amount of power on the AC. And these are typical people that are used to deal with numbers. How many tons do I need for this, square footage of area? But we also need to also bring into the fold these other variables that may be softer or maybe less easy to represent in numbers, but also add a lot of relevance to the way that we use buildings, no?
Avinash.
Yeah, I think he's right in that. I mean, nowadays we have some regulations like which defines the air changes required for a space. Let's say, take a classroom. So the number of air changes required based on the number of kids, that's defined in codes. So we design the air conditioning system in such a way that, okay, I mean, there will be like a fixed air changes happening every hour or something. And then lately we have been like putting sensors like there's a CO2 sensor in all the classrooms. So the moment you see that, okay, the CO2 is above the normal baseline figure, there's the alarm in that. And the BMS tells the main system, the main control system that, okay, this particular room has more carbon dioxide. And then that activates the AHU again and the air cycle changes. So there are things happening in this basically just to improve the quality, overall air quality performance. So it's happening actually. I mean, it has to develop to more extent, but it has started.
Okay. Moving on to the next point. As you know, globally, carbon has been identified as the problem and the solution. Many countries, many companies are setting net zero carbon for their operation. And there are cities around the globe have set also mandates on net zero buildings. Of course, net zero buildings is a general term. I want to hear from you your views. Do you think our cities in the region, in the GCC, in MENA would benefit from defining a net zero target for the buildings? What are views on that? Or how would you define as well net zero if we were to go for a net zero target?
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to help. If you see the data, the construction industry is responsible for like almost 40% of the global carbon emissions. So any change in this will surely help the overall reduction in greenhouse gases. Like in Dubai, there have been talks about like the whole of UAE will be like sort of net zero carbon building for the new buildings. So whatever we design by 2030 will be sort of net zero. I mean, that's the plan. Of course, I mean, there a lot has to go into the codes and how do we achieve that thing.
How do you define it, Avinash? What do you mean by net zero building? You say Dubai has started 2030 net zero. What does it mean?
So net zero will be like, if you see like any overall energy consumed by the building.
As an OPEX or as an input?
As an OPEX.
Operation?
As an OPEX. As an input. I mean,
as
that has
input.
to be like, yeah, as an input, yeah.
It has to be taken back with the
it has to be like, it has to be offset. Like whatever you have been using, you give it back to the system actually. So
what about the operation of the building?
I mean, that's very important actually. Operation of the building, I mean, there has to be studies done so that, let's say in the next 10 years or 15 years, you see like how much you're investing on the overall operations of the building. And then you specify the materials or the overall system in such a way that ultimately the whole thing is given back to to Mother Earth, you can say.
Enrique,
yes,
any views on net zero on Ras Al Khaimah?
Yes, we are actually trying to do it now as we speak. No, so it's more kind of a demonstrator of sorts to show that it is possible. However, we need to consider this, in my opinion, into two big areas. So you have what's there, the existing buildings, and you have what will become in the future as the new buildings. For the existing buildings, you need to understand that existing buildings suffer from something that Avinash said earlier, which is a passive design that is not great. So historically speaking, when we talk about buildings that were built 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, concerns about insulation, airtightness, etc., were not as strict as they are now, which means that these buildings will be, of course, naturally less efficient. We can retrofit them to some extent. We can even passively retrofit them to a certain extent. But essentially, we are focusing on the active systems, no? Now, this to say that in the end, no matter how many improvements you make, the building will use energy. So to become net zero, you of course need to offset it, no? With, for instance, renewables. Now, in order to do that, you need regulation, no? Essentially, if the question is it technically possible? The answer is yes, no? Obviously. This is being done worldwide. Why shouldn't we do it, no? We are much more advanced in so many areas, so there is no technical barrier for it. In my opinion, there is still a regulation barrier that we need to overcome to allow, for instance, wheeling, because otherwise, how can you generate for a Sheikh Zayed high-rise tower? How can you generate solar energy in that plot? Impossible, no? So you need to generate it somewhere else and wheel it back, no? For the new buildings, I think actually here we have quite an exciting opportunity, no? Because we can design new buildings to be by default almost a net zero building, with of course a certain offset that still will need to be done by the renewables part. But now we are talking about a much smaller amount. If we continue to improve on the designs as we have been doing so far, and the codes accompany these, and all of the technology and the architects and the consultants continue to contribute to this, we will be able to design very efficient buildings. Look, there is a standard called the Passive House Standard, a German standard, where using that standard, which is of course a very strict standard, but using that standard, you can build buildings that consume less than 49 kilowatts per square meter year, which is an extremely low, consumption for a typical office building or some sort of typical, building. Now, we are currently targeting as a very efficient building 92. So as you can see, there's still a long goal. But 92 is already ambitious because we are actually at 150 or 180 or something like that. So we are doing this route. What is exciting is that we are actually taking very little time to do this, no? If you look at, for instance, what is done in Europe, what has been achieved, in the last 25 years, no? We have achieved a very similar, comparable, if you want, output in 5 years. And this, of course, leads me to be optimistic in the future. We need to continue to push. It's still a long road, ahead, no? But we are doing it at an interesting pace, I would say.
Yeah. No, these are very important points, and you bring up the retrofit potential. Obviously, you can control the new designs and new buildings, but existing ones are the ones that are burning, big demand, if you will.
Exactly.
I think I'll add one more thing. Apart from the energy users and all those things, if we can target like building component, you take each and every material, and if you start targeting it in a way that you start using material which once disposed of after the life cycle is being used for some other purpose. So what happens that it doesn't go to a landfill. Whatever, let's say a building is there for 30 years, and after 30 years, once you are demolishing it, the thing goes and it's being used for some other purpose. So what you do, you have some sort of a carbon footprint for that particular item, which becomes zero, because it's a cradle to cradle concept, but it got started, and when we disposed of, it's being used for some other purpose. So that's one of the things that's going to help in overall energy conservation.
Yeah, the overall life cycle.
If I may just add something there, Hadi,
please.
Just contribution. The Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah has a target, which is that zero amount of let's say components of demolished building can go into the landfill. Zero. So if you demolish it, you need to recycle or reuse everything that you take out.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you get fined as a building owner. What happens if you don't?
So we have an agency called PSD that also has an MRF plant that takes it and treats it, separates it and then recycles it in different ways. No,
I mean, landfill should be eliminated in general for everything, obviously.
For this purpose, alone. Of course, there are other sources of waste that are still going to landfill.
Yeah.
But for these kind of construction or demolishing waste, we are trying at least to maintain it at a zero level.
Yeah.
So, honestly speaking, you can reuse everything. Some of them directly, some of them with certain treatment. But you can, no?
I mean, if you see the example of like current concrete, the cement and the steel has got like around 20 to 25% recycled content. And then I think as we go forward with more technology in place, I'm sure that it will go to like 50% or something like that. So that the process is started. It's just that we need to make it like more stringent and develop this whole technique that how to make it like more reusable.
Absolutely.
Now, gentlemen, I want to talk a little bit about there is a notion that green buildings are much more expensive than conventional, let's call them conventional buildings, and it's not worth it, and it's going to add a burden. And generally, even existing buildings that have elite certification, obviously the landowner demands higher rent from tenants. If you take an example, I mean, I'm thinking BIA, I don't know if BIA, the new headquarters for BIA, which was actually labeled as a net zero building, is finished or not. But take any example from your experience. How do you see the CapEx and the OpEx? Is it true that green buildings are expensive and will require significant higher rent, for example, to get for payback? Or what's your view on that?
I mean, I'll come to this one. I mean, we are doing one small school currently, and client, I mean, they wanted to put like solar panels on the roof. I mean, what the instruction came that wherever we have flat roof, put solar panels on. So we did a study of like CapEx and OpEx, and we found that it takes around 5 years to just recover whatever he's spending extra on the current budget. And then after that, he started his overall, because of DIVA's net metering, he's saving some 20% of the bills. So it's in a way, I mean, it helps actually. If you do the right study between CapEx and OpEx, it's going to help.
Yeah, in here I also have a very strong, opinion that is clearly in favor of it. I mean, we have studied, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of cases, and we have not found not one that has not a positive financial outcome if you consider, of course, the lifetime of the asset. No? So if you want a payback of 1 year or 2 years, then of course there are many cases that it won't fit. But you are not building a building for 1 year or 2 years. You are building a building for, I don't know, 20 years or 30 years or 40 years or whatever is the time life of the asset. Now, you build a building once, but you pay for it to be running every year that it is running. Now, if your question is building it once, is it more expensive if it is more efficient? The answer may be it is residual incremental more. So yes, there is a small residual value that we have even calculated to be between 1 and 2, maybe sometimes 3% of the total construction value. So
that's it, under 5%.
Yes, under 5% in any type that we studied, in every case that we studied. No, of course we are talking about according to our green building codes, which may be different from what you do in other studies. But we have always found this. Now, if you take a look at the payback are, even in the extreme cases, under 10 years. So the longest we found was 11 years. And we are talking about, for instance, subsidized rates. Even so, it takes 11 years for you to pay back the business case. So the question is not whether it is more or less. I think it is, to be honest with you, I think it is, a fait divers when you don't want to focus the topic. The topic should be total cost of ownership. What is my total cost of ownership? I build it less efficiently for a smaller or for a small decrease in the cost, but then I pay a premium price every year that I use, or shall I invest a little bit more and get my payback in a far lower period than the lifetime of my asset. I think if you ask these for any purchase you make, it's very simple to answer. No, the math is very simple, and we can show it in a very simple business case.
No, this is, yeah.
Need some education and some awareness there. But for me, the answer is an obvious yes. You should build it.
Absolutely.
I think it's the awareness. I mean, the awareness needs to be like developed, and maybe, I mean, there can be some codes actually, which makes you, I mean, do these things that, okay, whenever you're specifying something, you do a study of 10 years, let's say, and then you present that thing maybe in some form of like drawings or like calculations, or and I think ministries and even the municipalities, they need to work on this thing so that it's sort of mandatory for each and every stakeholder. So they have to do that, and then only you can explain that what exactly you are gaining if you are spending more in the beginning. You gain the thing in, let's say, 5 years, 6 years, but it has to be there in some sort of bylaws or something.
Yeah, but absolutely. I mean, go ahead, Enrique.
Please. No, I was just going to say that's what the word investment means. No, investment means that you put something up front to get a bigger benefit throughout the period, of time. I mean, we do it every single day, even in our personal lives. No, so I think sometimes it's just a mindset shift that needs to be because, I mean, from the numbers point of view, it's pretty obvious that it is a good
no-brainer. Absolutely. I mean, similar capex and 20-30% savings, net present value of that definitely makes full sense. And there are examples. Maybe we're not promoting these examples enough. Now I'm going to impose one last question for the sake of time. What are your views on the market in general? How do you see the rate of adoption? Are we short on regulations? Are we short on finance? We talked about awareness. How satisfied are you? And let's look at it from a GCC perspective, if you will. What are your views on the status of the market?
I'll come to this. I mean, I'll come on this. I mean, we have like the technology and people are changing. I mean, I've seen that the designs that's coming up in recent time, people are like going for like new innovations like active facades. So, I mean, there are companies who are doing something extra to just, I mean, save on these things and making the building more energy efficient. So it's happening. It's okay. It has to be done at each and every stage and each and every project. But it has started. I mean, I'll give you an example of like one of the buildings that recently done in Abu Dhabi. I mean, the building is complete glass-clad building, but they have got something called, which is active facade, where they have got aperture from the outside and basically on the west and the southern side, based on the solar movement and solar angles and gain. The aperture opens or closes, just restricting the overall solar gain in the building. So, I mean, these sort of things that needs to be like more in place.
Very well. Very well.
Yes. So I think, as I said, I think we still have a long way, ahead of us. But I also think we are doing it quite fast. No, if you look at, I always say, look at where we were 10 years ago. No. The way that we built it, the way that we thought about retrofit or efficiency or anything like that, it is like a world, away from where we are now. And we are talking 10 years back. We are not talking 100 years back, no? So we are talking that we are moving fast forward. Now, am I happy, for instance, you asked me, am I happy with the current status? The answer is no, I'm not happy because I wanted to do more, no? But I am happy of what we achieved so far. I'm happy, and I think we should be happy. Even of the small victories that we achieve, we should be happy and we should be, proud, because that's also how awareness is made, is by sharing the good cases that we have done. No, we may have done a few, but we should share it anyway and be happy about it, so that this can fuel a lot more in the future. If you ask me what is not there yet or what needs to be improved further, I would always focus on this point of awareness. I think technology, we have it. There are many different technologies. Finance, honestly speaking, I don't see as an obstacle. We work with ESCOs every day, and ESCOs are bringing us finance. They have plenty of finance available. Now, sometimes what we need is to convince people that this is actually a good thing, to do. And this has more, in my opinion, to do with awareness and with education than the technology or finance. And that's where I would bet more in this dissemination of the good examples, awareness sessions, training, education, starting in the schools with young kids. Whenever they are in 20 years' time making, decisions, they make it much better. All of this, I think, needs to be.
There is a very quick way to convince people, Enrique. Just enforce the regulation; they will be convinced.
I'll give you the example of.
That's the Middle Eastern way. That's how we would do it.
Yeah. No, I'll give you the example of like Dubai municipality. I mean, Dubai municipality rolled up their regulations maybe like 2-3 years back. And recently, I think 6 months back, it became a law that, okay, you have to have a silver rating in that. Before, like people were just using it as a book actually, and just as a regulation, they used to like comply to 1 or 2 credits, that's it. Because there was no law, there was no binding this thing credit that you have to comply to that. Now the law came that you have to have a silver credit for all your buildings. So now everyone will go for that.
Yeah, I apologize, gentlemen. We're running out of time. I really want to thank you, Avinash Kumar, Enrique Pereira, for your inputs.
Thank you.
It's been a great discussion. This can go on for hours. I was really enjoying it. And with that, I would like to call April to manage the sessions.
I just want to say a quick thank you to all our speakers. It was such a great session, and you've left the audience with a lot to think about. And a special thank you to you, Rahed, for moderating this great session. To our audience, up next, we have the last session of the Solar Show 2020. This session will explore powering the future of agriculture in MENA with solar. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.